Hello and welcome to another AIC video. I know that most of my laptop reviews center around ThinkPads. I tend to buy them and I also get them on review from Lenovo periodically. But whenever I get a chance to review something that's not a ThinkPad, I jump on it. I like to look as many different things as possible, and so in the past I've really liked some Dells, and when I had a chance to review this Dell, I definitely jumped on it. Well, what is it? This is a Dell Inspiron 3520 touchscreen. I was able to get this for review. I was not provided this by Dell, so this is my own review, my own words, and not sponsored in any way. Speaking of sponsorships, I don't typically do sponsored videos, so if you want to continue seeing more content on my channel, I do have some affiliate links down below for Amazon. If you use those, I also have a buy me a coffee link as well, if you want to continue to help me out. But as far as the specs of the system go, it is a 12th gen Core i5 1235U, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD, 1920 by 1080 15.6 inch touchscreen. Looking at the full system, we see that this is not a business class laptop. Typically on this channel, I stick to reviewing business class systems. Reason for that being, I find them to be of better build quality, especially when you're buying used and you want something to last a longer time. When you invest your money into a business class laptop, you tend to get that. And you kind of see that here in the bill of materials. I have a X280 here, and just the difference between the plastics here and the plastics here, as well as the keyboard, the consistency of the keys, and the feel of the trackpad. Sorry for the AMSR. But the consistency of the keys and of the trackpad are not great. The resistance needed to push them, as well as just the overall feedback you get, is definitely not as good as a business class laptop. My work laptop is a Dell Latitude 5420. It is a previous generation with an 11th gen Core i7. However, just like the X280, the materials are just better, less cheap feeling. Not saying that this is necessarily poorly made, but just in touching it, it doesn't feel as nearly of a premium product as you get with the business class systems. One thing that I found to be annoying for me especially is if I go to type on there, because the system is pushed over, the keyboard's pushed over, my left hand tends to sit along the edge here, and there's a little bit of a sharp edge there from the plastic molding. I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but you get just the sharpest edge there. Now the seam is down here. It's not where the seam is, it's where the mold halves came together, and my fingernail can just catch on it. And I just don't get that on higher end systems. I know that's a fairly minor thing, but it is something that might annoy some people like it does me. Now, one thing that confuses me with this laptop is the port choices. I talked about this in my previous video where I did a hardware showcase of this system. And all along the left side here, we have the power, we have an HDMI, which full-size HDMI, great. 2 USB 3.0s, great. They might even be 3.1. On the right hand side, we have our headphone microphone jack, a USB 2.0, and a full-size SD card reader. Now, I do appreciate the full-size SD card reader. I like the number of USB ports, but it is lacking a USB-C port, which I find to be very interesting because I have bought $150 laptops that have a USB-C port. And I'm surprised that on a 12th gen Core i5 processor laptop, not a Chromebook, not a super budget system, that it doesn't have a USB-C. And so that means that as I have slowly converted cables over to having more things be USB-C, I actually have to use an adapter on this laptop, where just a couple of years ago I was having to use an adapter to plug my USB-A stuff into USB-C. So I just thought that was pretty funny. The other thing that it gives me is no USB-C charging, which most of the systems I use have that. And so I actually just keep, I'll show you right here, a USB, oh, that's the wrong cable. I keep a USB-C charger just at all the places I typically sit and use a laptop at, because even if they have a separate charger, like my P1 Gen 7 has, you know, the slim charger, the square charger, it will trickle charge off a USB Type-C. And so I can sit down and work anywhere and be fine in my house. This one doesn't give me that option. I have to have the barrel plug charger available to me to charge this system. I do appreciate the upgradability and repairability of this laptop. I did a previous video where I did a hardware showcase. It does have 2 RAM slots, no soldered RAM. The Wi-Fi module is also not soldered down. The power plug is a separate piece from the system board and is easily replaceable. It just unscrews and unplugs and you just plug a new one in. That's just a couple of bucks versus, you know, having to replace a whole system board or doing soldering to replace a broken USB-C charger, which again, I appreciate that it has that. It would be nice if it had both. The storage is a standard NVMe M.2 slot. The strange thing is there are components needed to add a 2.5-inch drive, so it has the caddy and the screws, which is nice. Like I like that they provided everything you needed for that. But in this day and age, how many people wanted a 2.5-inch drive in their laptop, especially since it takes up space, where you would have additional battery? So, and it's an older SATA drive, so it's slower. So that one to me is, especially in a consumer grade laptop where people probably are not going to be opening this system, I just find that to be an odd thing to include. As I said before, this is built from kind of cheap feeling plastics. They're also pretty bad for picking up fingerprints. What it reminds me of is the dash in a 2007 Chevy Colorado that I had. It has that slight rough texture, especially around the palm rest. It has that slight rough texture that will wear over time, and you'll leave big, you know, prints wherever you rub it smooth from typing or whatever. I do like from the design that when you open it, and I know quite a few systems do this, but I like this design, where the hinge and the bottom of the screen actually lifts the bottom of the laptop off the desk, giving the system more air to breathe from and a very stable feeling laptop. So this is a feature I actually do really like, and I wish more systems implemented a similar style. As far as the general build quality beyond just the plastics of the system, it does feel fairly sturdy. There's not a lot of flex in the system, nor in the lid. The hinge feels particularly sturdy. There is no one-hand open on this. It is a two-hand open. But it does feel fairly sturdy and not like it's going to break immediately like some systems I have tested. One feature I turned off immediately on the system that was on by default out of the box was the screen brightness on battery. So I came in to the BIOS looking for a way to change the memory for the graphics. Some BIOSes let you dedicate a specific amount of memory for your graphics. I was hoping to do that so that way I could have better performing gaming on here, especially with 32 gigs of RAM. Don't need all of it for, you know, day-to-day use, so I was going to dedicate some of it. But I realized when I came in here looking for any settings in regards to that, I found this screen. It's under display in the UEFI, or this calls it BIOS, but it's UEFI. You have display brightness on battery power, which is that top bar, and then on AC power, and this was set to 50%. The other thing I had to do is where it says Eco Power, enable Eco Power. This will increase your battery life by reducing brightness when appropriate. So you have to turn that all the way up and check that box. The first time I went to use this laptop, I had charged it fully out of the box and then went to turn it on unplugged. And I was really disappointed with the brightness of the screen. I thought I was going crazy. It was really hard to see anything. Then when I went to plug it in for the first time and the screen brightened up and was at full brightness, all of a sudden I could see. I was really confused because I had checked the settings and it had told me that the brightness was up 100% in the OS. And so by coming into here and turning these off, I now get full brightness on battery power. Now that does have a fairly big negative impact on battery, but it means that I have control over the brightness and can set it to a level that I find appropriate and not let the machine think for me. So that's something that I did immediately. If you have this laptop and you are frustrated with the brightness of the screen being on battery, this is where you go to make that change. I don't think this should be buried in BIOS settings personally. I think this should be within the Dell software on the machine. Easier to access for most people. Overall, the screen is what I would consider to be adequate. It is a touchscreen, which is neither here nor there because it is not a high gloss glass touchscreen like a lot of touchscreens are. It's matte. It does mean that it will get fingerprints, but in day-to-day use, you don't get the major glare reflections that you typically get. So this one to me is perfectly acceptable. It's not super bright. It does tend to lean to the cooler side of colors, a little bit of a blue hint to it, especially it really shows up on the camera, which I don't notice so much with the naked eye, but it is fairly color inaccurate. So you wouldn't want to be doing any photo editing or color correction on the screen, but it's perfectly fine for day-to-day use and consuming media. One area where I am slightly disappointed with this system is with the battery life. You give up a big section where the battery could be for that 2.5-inch drive bay, and this system really only gets about 2.5-ish hours on battery. Now I could increase that by putting in battery saver or significantly reducing the screen brightness, but with similar settings, my P1 Gen 7 gets 5 to 7 hours of battery life with a similar actual like brightness of the screen. Because that screen's significantly brighter, naturally I can dim it and it'd still be as bright as this screen. And so instead of having that 2.5-inch drive bay, I would have much rather had a bigger battery in this system. 2.5 hours on battery with minimal use of the system is not really acceptable to me in this day and age. I thought with just a Core i5, it would be better. Another small gripe I have with this system is the speakers are pretty mid on it. Years ago, when phones were starting to be more media focused, but still had pretty terrible speakers, something I was told to do was to take your phone, his old phone, and put it in a cup. And this would focus the sound more at you, and it seemed louder, and you could hear it better. And so this is what I did, and that's kind of what these speakers sound like, is a phone shoved into a cup. There's no top end, there's no low end, and the mid sound pretty terrible. One good thing about this laptop is that it is very nice and quiet. I have a synthetic benchmark running right now, pegging that CPU pretty hard. And the single fan keeps the system cool enough and never really gets above much of a hush noise. Even in a quiet environment with nothing else playing, it was not annoying or intrusive. All too often, lower end systems will have a fan that puts out a high-pitched whine that I find to be incredibly annoying. This one doesn't, none of that, thankfully. When running games or benchmarks, the system stays relatively silent and cool. Definitely not like the jet engine that I'm used to with my P1 for sure, and even quieter than most of the ThinkPads I've used recently. All right, now I have Genshin Impact playing, and as you can see, it runs this game pretty darn well. It's actually one of the better experiences I've had on a system in a minute. More budget-oriented system, I should say. We're able to hit 60 frames per second without too much issue. Able to be at a battle and play the game and not run into issues. Let's go ahead and load up another game just to show what that's like. Alright, so we have Fortnite loaded up here, and the issue with Fortnite that I don't get in like Genshin Impact is, you can do up to the 60 frames per second just. More in the mid 40s to mid 50s is where it seems to want to sit. But it will drop randomly to single digits, which will become very frustrating. Like if you're in a a firefight with somebody, right there, and I'm dead because the frames drop so hard that I couldn't be competitive. So it's fine in some games, not great in others. I wish I knew what caused that frame drop, because it'd be really nice to not have that. As far as like normal everyday computing, I think this laptop is a pretty good deal. I still see them new on eBay for about $200 to $250. I think that's a pretty good price range for the performance you're getting. And if you can get it cheaper than that, I think it might be worth a grab if you're looking for just a basic computer that lasts you a year or two. I think it's a pretty solid option. So if you have any comments, thoughts, or questions, leave that down in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer that, and I hope you have an amazing day.